Our next panel is going to look at the water crisis that occurred in Mississippi. You know, as the planning efforts were going underway, like what were some of the big issues? And this was a big one, right? Water is one of those things we all take for granted, but without it, you can't live. So we asked Persia if she would moderate this panel with Andrew and Todd. And if you're going to get ground truth in this session, which I love. So if you're not familiar with Persia, she is the manager for the North Carolina Business Emergency Operations Center program there. She brings a lot of experience to the table, very innovative. And as we've seen over the years, she's a problem solver. So there's a perfect application for Persia to talk about help draw out the questions and the nuances that happened within this really critical event and how some of the private sector public partnerships came together to solve it. So Persia, I'll hand it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Tom. I hope everybody can hear me. This is the final panel of the day and a topic that all of us want to hear about, especially since it impacts all of us. I am glad to be joined by Todd DeMuth and Andrew McMillan, both of Mississippi Emergency Management, as you can see, on the aging infrastructure, which is becoming such a big, huge issue for every single city municipality in the country, and the public water systems, not just those, but all of them. So in this session, we're so thrilled to have the incident commander of the Jacksonville, Mississippi water crisis, and of course, Todd DeMuth, who was the fantastic coordinator for the private sector during that incident. So, gentlemen, welcome to your panel. To get started, I want you to introduce yourselves so that everybody knows who you are, especially since the light was so bright on Mississippi and continues to be. So tell us a little about yourselves, your role in Mississippi Emergency Management, and what you love most about the job. Todd, you can go first.
Thank you, Persia. Good afternoon, everybody. Want to lead off by expressing our appreciation for allowing Andrew and I to be a part of this summit, especially on the lead-off day. It's these kind of things that certainly help me in my new role, if you will, grow, exponentially across private and public sector capabilities and resources. I would be way behind the 8 ball if it wasn't for the collaboration of certainly the All Hazards Consortium and the good folks that are participating in the summits such as this today. So just quickly, I am the Business EOC Director / Private Sector Liaison. I've been with MEMA for 15 years and have been in almost every office. We have 8 offices in MEMA, and I believe I've been in 7 of them. But up until recently, I have been recovery-centric over housing and individual assistance, but also as the state coordinating officer since 2017. Now, I was not the state coordinating officer for the Jackson water crisis, and I thank my lucky stars that I was not. But I do have a pretty solid institutional knowledge of what emergency management is, what emergency management does, with the exception of the surprises that we get. I've heard it said multiple times this morning and this afternoon that it can be anything at any time. If we're not prepared for it, we can be caught behind the 8 ball. So certainly, I've been with MEMA that for maybe 5 or 6 years. MEMA has had the concept of a Business Emergency Operations Center with some good people that have tried to tackle it. The challenge was that it was not a primary assignment, if you will, for the particular person that it was assigned to. So for a long time, it was part of our external affairs department. And we reached a point early last year, or actually the last part of 2021, where we determined maybe that's not the best spot for it. So we called a council of colonels, if you will, a leadership group together to determine what we wanted to do. And I was in my former role as part of a member of that group. As part of that process, we reached out to Persia, and she gave us a very in-depth breakdown of what the BEOC is in North Carolina and could be anywhere. So once we looked at all that, determined that we were selling ourselves short, not being able to utilize every potential resource available to not only Mississippians, but Americans as well. We decided that we needed to enhance as an agency this position. And once we did so, and after discussion with Persia, I stepped in with both feet and volunteered myself to vacate the role of state coordinating officer and tackle the role as the Business Emergency Operations Center director. So, and we'll go into how that's been for me. I expect a little bit later. It's been some good, some bad, and a little bit of ugly, but mainly good. It's what I've realized is I don't know everything that I'm going to know or need to know, but so far I've been very, very pleased with not only our progress we've made as a state, but we've seen it in action. It's an unfortunate thing for the folks of Jackson, Mississippi. But on the flip side, the silver lining is we understand now that what a robust component that the business EOC and the private sector partners can be for not only these type situations, but all hazards, particularly the ones that may be uninvited or unannounced. So that's kind of where we are right now. And I expect we'll go into that further as we go along, but I'll turn it over to Andrew. I've taken enough time, let him introduce himself.
Hey,
Good
thanks,
afternoon,
Todd.
everybody.
Yes, sir.
Didn't mean to walk right on you there, Ms. Persia. I'm sorry. I can,
No, it's fine.
thank you for letting Todd go first so that I had the opportunity to say age before beauty. I never take or miss the opportunity to take a jab. I can say, and before I go too far into it, that being in this moment at all, I can thank Todd for, because he was the one who brought me into to MEMA when I applied and came to work here. I was under his tutelage for quite a while as an exercise officer in the Office of Preparedness, and thanks to him, had some exposure to Joint Field Office and some other federal exposures and opportunities to what we did at a very young age, so to speak, in career sense to this. So, and I can attest to you that Todd has been in 7 of the 8 offices, and in maybe a couple of offices that aren't offices anymore. We created some work for him in the past. But as I stated, I came into MEMA. I've been here for about 8 years now. Came in as an exercise officer in the Office of Preparedness, and worked in that field until about 2020, when I accepted the opportunity to be the operations chief here at MEMA, and held that role until about the COVID world broke open, and I worked through that and was fortunate enough to be able to take the response director position, and all of the joy that comes with that, and the 32 folks and personalities and all the ESFs and stakeholders and state partners, and water crisis and tornadoes and hurricanes and all the things that come along with what we do in emergency management. I think it was an interesting comment made by one of the panelists before us. There was to paraphrase it best I can, is, we end up in a lot of things in emergency management. Sometimes we're not always certain if we need to be there, but so many things dovetail into what we do that it's a difficult position sometimes to figure out exactly where you fit. And I think we'll unpack a lot of that in what we talk about here with the water crisis. So I look forward to this opportunity. I think, as Todd mentioned, we gave sort of lip service and kicked the can down the road a good while for our BEOC. And I noticed it may have been Zeta and Ida hurricanes. For those of you who don't know, we live in the cone of error down here between somewhere between Texas and the other side of Florida for hurricanes. And one of those two, we had a cellular provider reach out to us that had a charging station, trailer, and some things they wanted to offer. And it ended up at my desk as ops chief, which was okay. We were able to work it out, but it would have been nice to have had the proper channel or funnel for that to go through, so that we could be a little more strategic and efficient in how we place that. It still was an operational endeavor to figure out where the best need for it was in that. But I noticed immediately there that we had a need for some better communication in that. And I think certainly Todd and I have a working relationship that will lend itself to that. But I look forward to the good things to come and how we can dovetail a lot more of the private sector piece of this together.
Well,
so
Andrew, Andrew, I'm going to get you to pause right there, because we we all want to, we hear about all of the amazing, superhero Herculean stuff that you guys did, but we're definitely going to want to hear the full story. And at the end, I want to give Todd a chance to talk about the Mississippi DEOC, how folks get involved, and particular connections he wants to make. But can you bring us into it, Andrew? Give us a bit about the history of water issues in Jacksonville, some background there, so that we can get a wider view of what you were facing coming into this crisis. And then I'll swing back to Todd.
Absolutely. So I will take a few latitudes and opportunities that maybe some others wouldn't, and I was able to do some of that in my capacity in that incident commander role for this. But I'm a resident of the city of Jackson, and hold no have a little trouble holding the tongue sometimes with some of the difficulties there. So some of the things I tell you, they're not aimed at anybody in particular, but there were some very long stemming, systematic, and particular changing of folks in positions that led to a lot of the situations that they're still dealing with today. But when I was looking back, looking at some of the read ahead where you wanted some of that, like the background for what came to mind was one of the first coordination pieces I did with our new director of military support in 2021. I think he had had the job about 3 or 4 days, and he and I were trying to figure each other out. And we had just had some severe or some winter weather in Mississippi here right around Valentine's Day. In this particular case, it impacted Hinds County, which is the county that the city of Jackson is in. So it impacted Jackson, but numerous other jurisdictions around it. And that's key. And Todd will help me come back to this in a few moments. We kind of spitballed this, but in that particular case, we were able to get a state of emergency and an executive order to maneuver, which is what it takes, obviously, for us to utilize our National Guard assets. But there were numerous counties and jurisdictions impacted there. So that's our normal operating procedure in that. That's usually where the governor is willing to sign that state of emergency, is when he realizes it's outside one smaller jurisdiction or that there's a capacity busted. So February of 2021, we had what is severe cold weather here for us for several days that had a major impact on the water plants themselves, but more so on the distribution system. So your piping and all of that's under the roads here, coupled with some of the soil conditions and the state of those pipes and the age of them. It took the city water distribution system offline for several days. We had National Guard assets, water tankers, and personnel from the National Guard, while we were still working some COVID vaccine sites and testing sites as well. Had them at 4 or 5 sites for about 3 to 4-ish weeks in there for non-potable water, because folks didn't have water to flush a toilet. So we had folks wheeling up to those and some privately contracted tanker trucks that the city had that folks were literally pulling up with 5-gallon buckets in their cars to fill those things up to take back home, just so they could backfill the back of the toilet to be able to flush. And had lots of requests for bottled drinking water, and there were folks who ponied up and donated water during that time frame. So that's February of 2021. We got out of that one relatively easy. The city was able to get their treatment plants back online, make whatever Band-Aid repairs they could to the distribution system, and get those things back rolling. They were certainly not whole, but they were able to get pressure back into the system and get the plants back up. Those plants underwent some projects, or at least one of them did, some winterization projects based on what they experienced during that. And some of that was still ongoing when we ended up in the latest water crisis, I'll call it, when in August we went back into to that world, or further into that world. So there were boil water notices on the regular. Again, I live in the city, so I'll tell you, I have a neighbor who has a pool, and I have a submersible pump and a section of discharge hose that is my backup plan if the fire hydrant across from my house doesn't work. So that's my take on where I am. Not everybody else has got a neighbor with a pool, but I do, and that's my take on it. That's how severe the infrastructure breakdown and the management of the system and the lack of funding, for whatever reason. There's suits in play and political conjecture all over the place for that, but those are the measures that some folks have to take for it. My sister lives around the corner from me and has had a water leak outside of her driveway now for 15 months. So there's some of your systematic areas in that. We knew that those issues were there because the State Department of Health is they do the monitoring. They're the compliance folks for what has to happen in conjunction with the EPA. So there were little whispers here and there that we may end up involved in something having to do with the city of Jackson water crisis, but nobody knew what it would look like until I stayed at work a little too late on August 29th and was told that the governor was coming with the state health officer, and we were holding a press conference here. And the state health officer declared a public health emergency because of the lack of water pressure, because there had been a boil water notice citywide for over a month at that point. It did not appear that the city was going to be able to right the ship, so to speak, in what they had for loss of capacity for disinfected water. And that's drinking water, boil water notice stuff, not us looking completely at firefighting and the lack of that. The lack of being able to have any water pressure in any building over 1 story, depending on where it sits geographically or topographically within the jurisdictions there. So I stayed at work too late on August 29th, and as Todd said, he's been the state coordinating officer. My boss came down, he said, well, they're going to have a unified command. The State Department of Health incident commander will be Mr. Jim Craig, who we were all familiar with. And he said, you'll never guess who the MEMA version is going to be. And I couldn't wait to call Todd and congratulate him. Because I just knew it would be him from that state coordinating officer capacity, and it wasn't. It was they named me, and I laughed, and once I realized we were serious the next day, we got out there and got to work at looking at where we were. But last part of that, just to give you to how we got to August 29th, is what we had as a cursory understanding of what was wrong was that there were 2 major pumps having to do with the intake processing. That were offline or malfunctioning that needed repair, and that was the struggle. That was part of the case, but it was not the totality of what we ended up dealing with. And I could burn up all the Zoom minutes that we had telling all the details for, but that's a little background to get us to where we were, to where we are.
So Andrew, so we're talking about, and I want to make sure I have these numbers right, a population total in Jackson approximately 250,000.
It would probably be about 175,000-ish.
And is that
Now,
hospitals too?
That's going to be city proper. Now the water system services a population of folks in what is now an incorporated city area south of it that's called Byram, BYRAM. So they're on the water system as well, on the well water system of that. Difficulty in explaining all that is they're not directly tied to the surface water treatment plants, which is where you guys probably saw most of the news media and attention over all of that.
So at the time that you stayed late on the 29th and you got the heads up that there was a problem, and you said there was a declaration of emergency at that point. That was we're not talking about a city or county deck. We're talking about a state deck.
So there was let's say there were 2 declarations. So the city had, I don't remember when we got theirs proper, but the general flow of things, emergencies start local and end local. So we usually depend on the city to make a proclamation or a declaration of emergency, then the county, and then they make theirs. And basically, Todd, give me the thumbs up if I get this right. They say they have an emergency that has overwhelmed their capacity, and they ask the state. In this case, they asked the governor to sign a state of emergency that backs them up. So we had, in this case, remember I said the state health officer declared a public health emergency for this water system. It's his monitors and his compliance folks that have been working with the EPA and the city had some findings and some absolute do outs that they needed to do that had not been done. And that's where the public health emergency piece of that comes in. The state of emergency piece came in. It's my understanding with the governor being able to activate the 2 agencies. The Department of Health was the lead agency, but they don't do the logistical piece of this and the emergency procurement and those things where we have those capacities, in emergency powers under the Stafford Act and those. So public health emergency, state of emergency from the governor, executive order that lets us activate the National Guard, implements and start to move those things. Without that, we cannot do that. And to top it all off, we get on the 30th, the next day, an emergency measures declaration from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, from the President of the United States, which is something we're not unfamiliar with. We generally ask for those as a pre-landfall declaration for hurricanes. This was a one-off that we got it for this. Nobody, I don't think anybody thought we'd get the declaration, but the next day we had it.
So you're talking about a limping system, then it begins to crumble further, then a health crisis, because I understand there's hospitals, assisted living, restaurants, everything that you would have there. And then now you are the incident commander, head honcho, king of the mountain. Tell me about your steps and tell me about at what point you thought, holy cow, I need to call Todd or the BEOC or I need some help.
So just be mindful that I was, I guess we'll call him co-incident commander with Mr. Jim Craig, who was the Department of Health's incident command lead on that. And under his purview is or many things. To be honest with you, I think he retires this year. They're having to hire 3 or 4 folks to backfill his status, but he was acutely aware of what was going on there and the difficulties they had with getting the city to comply with the multiple with all the turnover they had in public works directors and lack of repairs and things of that nature. So yeah, head honcho, it didn't really feel like that. I kind of felt for a moment, I felt like I had been thrown to the wolves, but I was comfortable in the construction world and the process world. I like those things, so it wasn't completely unfamiliar to me. But to quote our former executive director, I got a $1 million education in surface water treatment, 1 nickel at a time, spread out over 3 months out there. So I tell you, it took us. We thought initially on the arrival on the 30th that we would have the Department of Health engineers and those smart folks who understood surface water treatment and what was supposed to be happening. We thought we'd give them 1 day to assess the O.V. Curtis treatment plant, which is where our command post was and where I was actually stationed for those 3 months. And then that they would move the next day to the other surface water treatment plant, the older one downstream, JH Fuel. And it took 3 days just to get our heads wrapped around what all was going on and what all needed to be repaired and what steps of the processes we may begin to affect those repairs and make purchases and what we had to do there. And it postponed the getting to JH Fuel by a week or so. So and I guess
were the people actually having, did they have a trickle? Like, did they have water but no water pressure, or tainted water, or I mean, what were the people in the communities actually?
All of the above, depending on where you were. So I'd say as a crow flies from the O.V. Curtis treatment plant, my house is probably 2 miles if you took a straight line at it. We were pretty fortunate. We were low enough from in the system that we didn't lose any. But the further you got south into the central part of Jackson, Midtown, South and West Jackson, and down to Byram, some of those folks had no water, and those who did, in some of those aging infrastructure areas, and that did have darker water. It was what they were getting was not disinfected drinking water, hence the precautionary boil water notices, because you've lost pressure and you've lost the chemical balance and the disinfection piece in the distribution system there. So it was a mix of all of it. There were restaurants, who can't run ice machines, folks having to sling bottled water. The majority of the hospitals in the metro area here have drilled their own wells as a result of their unwillingness to depend upon the other in that, to include the University of Mississippi Medical Center, which is our largest, our Trauma One center there, and the other major hospitals in the area. I think there's one in South Jackson area that does not, and they'd probably be the ones who need it more than the others. But that includes, you're talking folks on dialysis, folks who may need to fight a fire. You think of all the precautionary measures we had to take with that. You're dragging volunteer fire assets and capacities from where they're needed in those rural areas where there's not a piping system in place, and fire hydrants to wheel up to and do that. You're taking those measures to make sure that if you do have something happen within the city proper, that you're capable of responding to those things. At those hospitals as well, those wells are there to keep the water going inside the facilities. You don't want to have to drain that, and you could quickly to fight a fire at a hospital. So lot of balls in the air at this point to just to get the size up of what we were looking at. But it was certainly not the 2 pumps that we were told were offline when we showed up.
So you got threats increasing. You're trying to wrap your arms around what the root of the problem, what your action plan is going to be. I'm assuming there's going to be, folks talking about bypass. Can we repair temporarily? Can we get water going? All of that discussion while the people are out of water. So were you guys thinking of how much water do we have in state warehouses? I know that would have been a question that came up. How can we distribute it? How did you go through those steps of, because we talk about natural disasters all the time and we can say, hey, all hazards approach. But when you're talking about this wide distribution, I'm
So
wondering.
that
how
night
your
I stayed late.
problem-solving happened.
That was where I was with our director of military support. That was my normal capacity, and that would be to coordinate with them so that we could set up these point of distribution sites. So we have emergency and standby contracts for water, bottled water. It's not uncommon to us to have to engage in that. So I guess one of the things I haven't framed is what you're talking to me about is the water treatment plant side of it itself, the actual working on the OB Curtis should produce 50 million gallons a day, and JH Fuel should produce 20 with a capacity to flex to a 30 in there. And we were basically working on JH Fuel's 20. While all that was going on, that 29th, I was talking to the director of military support on how many point of distribution sites we would have, how many soldiers it would take, what their command and control piece would look like for that, while our logistics folks were activating those standby contracts and doing some serious math on the numbers you got there. So you gave me a population number that I've seen a couple of other places, and we have to do what we know for census data in there and tax roll records and anything we could get our hands on, do some quick math on what that looks like, and then be willing to pivot and or realize that we undershot or overshot. Obviously, you guys know that logistics, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Sometimes just depends on which way the coin falls. So there was a lot of that consideration to make sure that we had the public safety piece of that there, that folks could get access to non-potable water. It wasn't as much of our focus this time as it was in the freeze. In that you were really more worried about, in this case, making sure that folks could get drinking water, because it was citywide that folks couldn't drink out of the taps. So a lot of that going on to figure out, and I wish I know we had 7 sites, if I'm not mistaken, that we actually distributed bottled water from, and I can't remember how many bottles it was. It was a crazy amount of trucks and trailers. I wish I had that to share, and May can find it here while we talk. In a major undertaking at our state staging area at the Mississippi Coliseum in Jackson, where we had our Forestry Commission folks running the staging area, and all of those trucks coming and cycling through, and then making those deliveries and drops to those National Guard run distribution sites.
So
That was what
point
they
did
were
you
doing.
connect? Oh, they started. So National Guard is activated. This is water from state warehouse. This is all of the excess you had, probably everything you had in warehouse. So at what point did
Absolutely,
you?
with
right?
those contracts in play, I mean, we started purchasing and basically warehousing our water at the state staging area pretty quick on.
So at what point did you tap Todd or say, hey, how long can we sustain this? Because that's that's what you start to get into. How long can we sustain it?
So in honesty, there's a lot of one-off and weird to this particular event, but I was very removed from in my capacity at OB Curtis Water Treatment Plant because of the acuity of what we had to work on there. I was way further removed than I have ever been in a response capacity from that distribution side of it. It wasn't, I mean, I could see the reports daily, and I was on all the group messaging for all those things that I was normally on. But the fires, we were sort of hand-to-hand combat at the treatment plants and working on getting that back while the other side was going on. I know Todd and I talked. It's a lot of folks are quick to data mine an email address and a position or capacity. I know through COVID there was no shortage of that, but I bet Todd and I could compare and contrast how many reverse osmosis water treatment process opportunities there were to us and things of that nature. And that to bottle water. And I had a call from somebody who said they spoke to the governor and they worked with some other water, something that was out of the Bahamas somewhere. I mean, it's, you name it, we got the opportunity for those things to be there. And that's where I go back to the joy of what I think we'll have from the BEOC side of that, is that there is a clearinghouse for that to deconflict what's some of what's real and what's not, and where we could have value added. So Todd and I talked, but not on the level that we normally would in here, to be honest. I would say that I told him one of the failures I feel like I had in that was not utilizing the opportunity for somebody for us to work with private sector to help us maintain a feeding capacity for all of the emergency management assistance compact folks that we brought in here from, I think, 9-ish states. You know, we probably had an extra 20, average 20 folks a week or 2 weeks out there. And it was hard to keep up. It was hot. August and September and October in Mississippi are hot, and these guys were they were getting after it. So burning through the bottled water that we did have, we had that, but they wanted the Gatorades, and we had a few folks donate some lunches and things like that. But there was that piece of it, I think, was an opportunity that I missed in that, where we could have tapped into that. And some of the local folks really wanted to help, but hell, the Jackson restaurants couldn't cook. They couldn't perform in it. So we talked, but not to the level that I would have been necessarily as involved in this one. That would probably have been more in our logistics, our chief logistics officer, and what we were getting for requests through there, because it was a pretty quick clip to get that turned on. So to give you perspective on that, if you say August 29th, August 30th, we showed up, we got out from under the boil water notice on September 15th. So you had, that gives you what, 16 days, 15 days?
Yeah.
That's how long it took for us to get stable with the help that we had. I mean, we had help, I believe, on the ground within the first 3 days from Florida and some other places, and we're able to band-aid some things together. But that got us out from under the boil water notice. And then you had all these folks saying, okay, well, the FEMA folks wanted us to be done, saying, all right, we got out from under that, we're good. But everything you were just one domino critical failure away from being right back where you were on the 30th or the 14th of September, for that matter.
Well, I want to jump over to Todd for a minute, and Andrew, I want you to chime in if we need to do some back and forth. So Todd, you see this happening? Andrew is the incident commander. You guys are beginning distribution. This is a question about sustainment. How long can we go with this crumbling system? Tell me about your thoughts regarding, capabilities. What can I do? It's relatively new BEOC.
Yeah, so let me take you back to where I was on August 29th. I was off. I was at home and had just finished watching a movie about 4 o'clock. I think it was Andrew, I think it was a Monday afternoon, if I'm mistaken, August 29th. Look back and see, but I was off that day and got a text from our chief operations officer, who's Mr. Matt Hewings, because as Andrew has stated, he was immediately neck deep fighting hornets. I was unaware of any of this going on until I got a text from our chief operations officer to call him. Jackson Water is about to go offline. So I called, and he informed me that in fact what I heard was accurate, that Jackson Water, what I'd heard, Jackson Water going offline, meant what I thought it meant, is that we had a critical situation here. So and he said, I know your operation is young, but see what you can do. So I got off the phone. This is about 5:30 in the evening, and had a Fred Sanford moment. Like I thought for a second I was having a panic attack. But I gathered my senses to the best of my ability, and I did what I instinctively thought to do, is reach out to my private sector liaison partners, of which I think there are either between 19 and 25 of me around the country, and I believe growing. But we have a very robust communication network that not only extends to Zoom, but it extends all the way down to group text messaging. And in a panic, I sent the word out to that group. I shot the flare, if you will, with this group that I was in trouble. And, fortunately, I'd been a part of the group for a few months and they knew my status as rebuilding this BEOC. So that's where I was at that moment. I will say this, the fact that I had that group of my colleagues, if you will, around the country, just to send that flag up to, it was a huge moment of relief for me, not even knowing what would come of it, but to know that there were people out there that were listening. And I'll say this, within seconds, I had more phone calls and text messages than I could handle as a single person from that group. To, I think more than anything, let me know that they were there. Let me know that, you're not in this fight alone and you have eyes on you and you have help to whatever degree capability we can provide. So I must say it was an emotional moment for me. There's that 24-hour prior to us getting the notification that we had a critical situation. And, Andrew and I have been here long enough to be through many, many critical situations. But when you're talking about a basic human right of not having drinking water, any water, at all for any capacity is something that really, those are the kind of things you hope you never, ever hear. And here we are right in the middle of it. So, let me backtrack to what Andrew's saying, give him a little more credit because within 16 days, you had boil water notice lifted, but within 4 days, you had pressure back to a good bit of the city where people could at least use running water in some capacity or another, where for a while, it was nothing. I know Andrew said you have this very small pocket, depending on their geographic relation to the O.B. Curtis water plant that did not quite feel the impacts as well as most of the rest of the city, but most of the city was dead in the water, for lack of a better term there. So we knew quickly that we had the operational side of things, but now it's time to flip the switch. Fortunately, my private sector partners or colleagues, if you will, were kind enough to join me on a Zoom call the next day and started talking through it. I started as a result of me reaching out to my private sector friends. I had folks call me that I wasn't even aware existed. Within 24 hours, I had Mr. Venables, who I will always be dear to me, reach out to me. I don't even know how he found my contact information, but just that alone let me know, I've got help. So what we had to transition. I realized within 48 to 72 hours that I had certainly gotten folks' attention, and people started to realize who I was. And what I realized very, very quickly, and was kind of a shock to me, was the generosity of these offers that were coming from these folks, specifically Lowe's, Anheuser-Busch, Walmart, initially right out of the gate. Some heavy hitters there that I had not thought about when it came to, I've not thought of this situation or this scenario, that reached out to me and said, hey, we've got some water. And of course, after that, you started getting lots and lots of folks, McDonald's, Amazon, things that I'd never dreamed. I never knew Amazon could even help in that capacity, started reaching out to me. So when I had to pivot, I realized quickly that we have assets, we have ways to get water to the citizens of Jackson. What I had to realize or figure out very quickly was where am I going to send these resources, and how am I going to get these resources out to the folks that actually need it? So I had to turn into a logistician. These are things that I'm going to plan on in events in the future, things that, so I'm private sector liaison. When I flip the switch, I'm also going to be a logistician, and I'm also going to be a resource/donations manager. And that actually, you have problems, some good, some bad. This was a good problem for me. Not that it lessened my anxiety in any capacity, but that I did have resources, but now I have to figure out where they're going to go and how we're going to get them out. And fortunately, we had the idea to contact our, of course, being in Mississippi and any southern state, we have no shortage of faith-based organizations, specifically in the city of Jackson. And they were a godsend. Once they realized the need, we expressed the need. Hey, we've got water coming in for your citizens. We don't have a way, we don't have anywhere to put it, and we don't have anywhere to get it out. And that's where these churches really stepped in and fulfilled that role for all of us. So you have to do that as well. You have to be, I had to be incredibly resourceful and not afraid to reach out to folks, just to see what their capabilities could be. But the faith-based organization stepping in was a huge godsend for us. And we know this now, these are relationships that are established. It's my job to make sure they're maintained, and which they will be, in case, there's a likelihood of this happening again. The anxiety level, certainly on my end, will drop significantly because, I've been through the experience and I have these contacts now. I have these relationships built that, while it will be a fight, we won't take so many punches, so many bruises the next round. God forbid we ever have it again. And to me, that's something that will help us sleep a lot better at night as well. But yeah, a lot of lessons learned, good and bad, but mainly good. It was, I went from mini heart attack to, it's kind of an exaltation of joy knowing that we had the capability here. The fortunate part for me, as a test run of the BEOC mechanism, was that it was mainly just one commodity that we were really needing, and that was water. We obviously know that in a large scale situation, i.e. a hurricane, direct hit from a Cat 4 hurricane, that we're probably going to need a lot more as far as the line of commodities, certainly, and or physical resources behind it. But it was certainly not the test run I wanted, but looking back on it, something that I'm glad that we did have the opportunity to test it out and to see how robust the capability could potentially be. And when I tell you it's mind-boggling, and it's something that will forever humble me, not just as a emergency manager, but as a citizen of Mississippi, to know that we have these capabilities now, things that we did not utilize before. Before BEOC really became a robust operation, it's something that, here's what I say. We have the private sector that is more than willing to get in the game, to be a part of the fight. And I heard it mentioned on a panel before this earlier today, mass feeding operations. Who does it better than Chick-fil-A? And these folks, is what they do for a living. That's what they do to survive. So, you have these operations now, you have these conduits to these capabilities and resources. And all it takes on my part is the building and maintaining of relationships. The figure out, we'll figure out. That doesn't scare me as much anymore. But how do we maintain and keep these folks together and make it a win-win for not only the public sector, but for the private sectors, and more importantly, the citizens of Mississippi. I can't say enough about it. And if there was a question as to whether we made the right decision to push forward on our BEOC concept, I think it was answered on all fronts during the Jackson, Mississippi water crisis.
So in incorporating the private sector into the EOC, state EOC, and it sounds like you have a lot of planning points now, things now you want to prepare for, being able to see how resilient you can be. And I'm sure that Andrew has more ideas, because I noticed that after one incident like this, then you really start to see the big picture of what you can do. And so I've got a question in the chat that I want to put to y'all, and it's someone is asking, how did you ensure an equitable distribution of water to all the impacted communities? And they're mentioning disabled, senior citizens, non-residents, folks like that. And how did you work with the private sector to prevent any price gouging, But I think that might have been more like people buying from grocery stores and that kind of thing.
Let me handle that second one, and I'll let Andrew handle the first one, if that's all right with him. So fortunately, in Mississippi, as I assume it is in all states, when we have an event, it is, especially if a state of emergency is declared, which it was in this case, it is illegal to price gouge. And fortunately, we have a leadership system in Mississippi that they take that very, very seriously. If messaging will go out from the governor's staff immediately, if you see price gouging, or if you feel like there is any way, shape, or form a price gouging mechanism, do not hesitate to report, and we will come down on them hard, and they do. I personally didn't see or hear in this particular incident a whole lot of instances of price gouging. Now, that being said, some of these places didn't have water to price gouge you with. So they ran out, those that did ran out pretty quick, probably before they realized we even had a situation on our hands. So those that would have considered price gouging, I don't think really had the opportunity in this scenario to do so, because one, it hit them so fast, and two, they probably ran out of supply pretty quick. Unless you were one of the restaurants or stores or businesses, and there were just very few, but there were a few, because of the ongoing water issues that happened before August 29th. And we're going back years now, months and years. This is not anything new as far as boil water notices. Some of these restaurants have been proactive and have bought their own water tanks, and they are self-sufficient, self-reliant as a result. But as far as, and Andrew can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not aware of a huge price gouging incident in this scenario or this event because of those variables that I just mentioned. And I don't think they had the opportunity, but had they done it with as many eyes that were on the city of Jackson during this event, I imagine that would have been nipped in the bud, and those who were caught doing it would have paid the price for it. I can assure you of that, with everything that the governor of Mississippi could have brought forward to them.
Well, I want you to think about, Todd, how you track those donations on the donations management side. While I asked Andrew about that first part of that question, which was distribution to underserved communities or senior citizens or other folks that would otherwise have difficulty getting water.
So I could give you the mantra, the ICS portion of that, the whole community, and all of our plans and opportunities to close gaps, things of that nature, are based on a whole community approach. So there's obviously no vetting criteria or profiling before we would go to those links, but there were already some distribution sites in play for the city. Remind you, I said before we came in, they had been under a precautionary boil water notice for over a month. So there were some coordinated sites that they had at some city fire departments. But I'll tell you, the notion of ours, I think I told you earlier, we had 7 point of distribution sites for those the bottled water, drinking water. There are 7 wards in the city of Jackson, so that's how those were identified. We made sure we had a footprint in each of the 7 wards, coordinated with the city council members and city government, and to ensure that we coordinated with the Jackson Housing Authority and others to ensure that we knew where there were gaps, or where they knew that there were folks. Matter of fact, they ponied up the folks that was needed. They said, we don't need you to come and help us get this to here, but if you can bring it to our community center, we'll have the housing authority folks go and make sure that Todd's residence is checked in on. And they had built those lists, and that's in this particular case, that's something from the state level, from where Todd and I are sitting, and our logisticians and those folks are. We have to depend on that information to be able to identify where those needs are in that. So those are the main mechanisms. That with the American Red Cross, tons of faith-based organizations. We had a lot of those folks bringing water from outside. That's probably the biggest logistical piece of that. In the equitable portion of that is how do you, not necessarily equitable in that, but wise in where you push your resources to. If you know you've got a big faith-based push based on some brother and sister churches, or some union between some type of churches happening there, being able to tap into that is an advantage to know, so that you don't force multiply or over send into this area when you can shift a little focus to somewhere else. So
Well, that works
that's a
out
moving
great,
target.
right? It works out great, right? When the locals are really hammering away and then you're doing the support and it kind of flows on down the way we would like it to happen. And
There's a lot of spotlight on us here. I know I remember being at events with folks from other states and talking to folks from Georgia, and they're like, "We got the Super Bowl this year," and I'm thinking, "Man, we'll never have a Super Bowl." I can't imagine having to go through that. Well, we didn't have the Super Bowl, but in case you didn't figure out who the football coach was at Jackson State University last year and all the notoriety that came with that, we had the near critical mass with almost boil water notice on the day before homecoming here, which was one of the most publicized and spotlighted games. We had college game day here for the first time in history for this stuff. We had a lot of spotlight here. So thankfully we were able to get good folks who wanted to help and do the right thing by that, whether they just wanted the publicity or they were doing the right thing by it. We had enough of that, I think, to offset some of that political back and forth and the other infighting that happens that sometimes is an impediment to that. But if I could touch to the gouging piece of that for a moment, Todd's right. We do a really good job in the state from days of Katrina and before that, but certainly from Katrina and those very austere conditions and times that we had here. I live in Jackson, and Katrina was a Cat 1 when she came across my house in downtown Jackson. A lot came with that, and there was a lot of gouging and a lot of folks doing crazy stuff for a gallon of gas or 10 gallons of gas, but not necessarily gouging in that. I think Todd was also right. There wasn't a whole lot of water on the shelf to be gouged for. There was some, but not enough. But where I had to pay attention in the capacity I was in was in the repair business of pieces and parts and implements and those things that it took to run that water plant, and in the procurement of those and in the quotes that we get, because everybody sees, not everybody, but it's a broad brush, but there are folks who are cued in enough or clued in enough to say, okay, here's a disaster declaration, state of emergency. So they're gonna spend money without paying attention. And that was probably the biggest learning curve in the capacity that I had there. I never thought in an incident commander position that I would be in the monetary fiduciary side of things in the way that I was in there. But we did have to vet quotes, and even though we get to suspend within reason some of those procurement rules, it was a heavy lift to make sure that you knew that the price you're getting for this widget that you don't know a whole bunch about was a fair market price for that widget.
well, we thank you, Andrew, for your command on this particular incident. And I want to give Todd a chance, thanking both of you. I want to give Todd a chance to tell everybody quickly about the growing BEOC in Mississippi, highlights of the program there, and what you need, Todd, in terms of key partners. And I'm going to ask Laura if she'll post your BEOC contact information for any potential private sector partners that are on the call with us.
Sure. If any of you were on the very first panel that had our executive director, Stephen McCraney, on it, I posted in the chat there, but it's MS, that's the Mississippi, the postal letters, MS BEOC. In fact, what I'll do is I'll just type it in the chat right here real quick. MS BEOC at MEMA.ms.gov. It should be in the chat there. So let me jump back real quick, Persia. I think one of the things that helped us with the equity piece, in Mississippi is very fortunate to have a disability integration advisor within the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency. And I think that actually helped because of the relationships they make. Blue Sky days, they can identify and they know right off the top who is going to be vulnerable or the most vulnerable in these situations. Quickly on the donations, there was a question about how to track donations.
Now, how did you track?
One of the things I quickly realized once the ball started rolling on this was that this was way too big for me to handle by myself as a single human being. So fortunately, I have the support of leadership and who said you grab any human in this building you want. Or multiple humans, and you bring them in and you let them help you. So I immediately found I'm located geographically in the Office of Preparedness. And I went to our preparedness director. I said, I need the best Excel user you have. And I just need her to be able to build a spreadsheet and populate it quickly with formulas. And within an hour I had that. And I've quickly utilized her to the fullest capability. And I could not have done it because one thing that wasn't really taught to me, or I wasn't listening to, and my learning comeuppance in the BEOC, if you will, was the necessity to track the commodities and or resources that might be coming to you. I mean, you think, oh, this is great. This stuff is free and at no cost to the taxpayers of Mississippi. But at some point, somebody's going to want to know what exactly you got and where exactly it went. And in ways I didn't think about. I mean, we have potential lawsuit, that could potentially come out and go, well, y'all did discriminate, or y'all did not do whatever you needed to do. And we can show on paper with proof exactly how and why and when and where we did that. So yes, it's pretty crude. But I had a human being, a fantastic, smart young lady in here with me. Wherever I went, she went. Every phone call I got, she listened to. In fact, she ended up taking over that role. And every conversation, the high points, we didn't just track resources and cost or estimated value of those resources, but we also track the conversations that were had. What was said here? What was the implication? Or what will be the implication, down the line or in the future. So that was, I'm sure there's a better way. I have not. I know that Persia certainly has a WebEOC type capability. If it's not in WebEOC, that can try. I have not gotten there yet, so I had to get a little more basic.
You'll get there.
We were Excel spreadsheet. I highly recommend. Because I am not, and I can assure you, Andrew is not an Excel spreadsheet guru. So, and I know this because he used to work for me. So neither of us are Excel guys, but as long as we know someone, I can make it work. Now, the future plan for Mississippi is to develop a dashboard / resource request or resource donated board where we don't have to the software itself should be able to put that together for me in my mind. So yes, we plan on making it a little easier for ourselves, but to answer that specific question for this event, Excel spreadsheet.
Well, just stubby pencils sometimes work. Well, you go with what you got. So I want to thank both of you so much and for giving us all the information. And we appreciate everything that you did for the folks at Jackson. And it's been my pleasure. And I'm going to thank the folks that have stayed with us as we've run over time and turn things back over to Laura. Thanks, Andrew. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.